wetlands within 100 feet and that we might be in the wetland buffer zone, but I don't think that's true, to be honest.
No, I
I'm
think
looking
that's
at the
another.
GIS map right now and something's not jiving. Sorry, I'm going into way too much depth here.
That's all right, but it's interesting to hear the things that folks are talking
Yeah.
about and concerned about.
The other thing that's just, and this is something for us to follow up on, is water service and sewer to that site. Follow up on that.
Yes. Oh, hey, Tina's here.
Hey, Tina.
And we're in public meeting mode, I'm assuming, so folks may be listening in the audience, as it were.
Yes, I think we've got 3 attendees who kindly joined us.
Great.
And I mean, technically we have quorum, so why don't we start? I know Tim Knight is going to be a few minutes late, and Tracy's coming back from work, so she'll pop in when she gets here. But I see Sharon is on and Tim Bonfatti is on. Hi, folks.
Hello.
So, hello. So I'll call this meeting to order, and it is 7:05. And I'll just take a very quick roll call. And Sharon Tatro.
Here.
Tim Bonfatti.
Here.
Hi. And Anna Mayo Brook here. Super. All righty. So we'll wait for the minutes later. Really, what we want to talk about the public forum that's coming up on October the 14th. And I'm so glad Left Field and Arrow Street are here. So do you guys want to update us on what your thoughts are and the direction you're thinking of going into?
I guess, yes, we certainly can. And as I mentioned, Emily's done a little bit of research trying to understand the issues that are being communicated or concerns that are being raised in the various social media channels that are out there. I think what would be good to talk about first is to understand a little bit how you see the evening going on the 14th. There's a couple of different ways to do it, and just want to get the sense of this group of the balance between presenting information and wanting to gather people's input and opinions. And I think it might be good to sort of think about it holistically, and then we can dive into some of the details about more specific items we may want to address.
Sure.
And you guys have given any thought to that? How you think in terms of this is, part of the instructions given to us by the Board of Selectmen, really.
Right. Now, I recall that, and anyone chime in as well, that Gus and Mike Marcucci were quite specific of what they wanted to do. I thought as well, your presentation was it was great that evening in terms of the slides and how it was presented. It was very clear. And so it sounded like they wanted to go over that again, or at least present that maybe in a condensed way. And then some of the issues that Emily is working on as well. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I do think, this is going to come down to cost as well. I do think it's always down to cost, and people are going to really want to analyze that as well. So I don't know, maybe Tim Bonfatti or Sharon, do you have some input you'd like to share in how the evening should roll out?
Well, I'll start, I guess. It seems to me we probably need to, I think the building committee members need to explain their rationale behind why they supported the option they supported, right? And it seems, I guess that's kind of my take on it now. Whether that comes before a general explanation of all the options or after, probably after, I would think. But
Hmm.
it seems to me that that's going to be required, because the whole point of it, as I see it, is to get feedback from the community as to, you know, why did the committee support that option, because that's the option that's currently on the table, and then hear what the reaction is to it, right?
You know, I think that's a great point, Tim. And so we talked about it in our SBC meeting, but not at the Board of Selectmen. And I think that, I mean, how would you see that playing out? Would we have a slide with all the voting members and maybe their professional roles? Because I think, you know, even when we were talking about it at the SBC meeting, you know, Walt Kincaid, Mike Weber, you know, that they're the professionals in the business and they've done projects like this. And I think it's really important to really emphasize the quality of volunteers that we have serving on this committee and how their experience, their breadth of experience and knowledge, you know, was really thoughtful. And this wasn't an arbitrary choice. So I think it's a great idea to either have them a slide, or maybe this would have to be listed as, well, this will be listed. So this will be our meeting. So we wouldn't have to worry about open meeting laws or anything. So.
Anna Mae, I think Tracy is sitting on the outside if you want her in.
Owen, do you mind bringing Tracy Rogers over pretty quickly?
There you go.
Thank you. So yeah, so Tim or Larry, how would you see that? Or Lynn, would that be a slide of committee members and their professional titles or something or other, and have them speak if they need to, or just maybe some bullet points? How
Yeah, I think, and Emily and I were sort of thinking about this the other day as we were sort of kibitzing on the issue, is I think that's a two-edged sword a little bit. In other words, it's good that people understand who the committee members are and their particular expertise, but I think to the extent that that becomes a trust us, we'll make the right decision, that's not going to sway people's vote. So we want to be a little cautious on that, but I do think it's a good sense of maybe as sort of an introductory slide, here's who these folks are, and they can introduce themselves, or there's a quick slide just to give people a sense of who the school building committee is in the event that they may not be quite sure who the folks are and or who
I do
they
think
should
it's
reach out to.
important to say it. I mean, I think you're right. Their professional credentials can't be the reason why they picked it, but it certainly speaks to why they know what they're talking about. Which, I mean, I'll just be honest, like, I didn't fill out the survey, even though I've been sitting on this committee, because although I'm on the warrant committee, I don't have direct knowledge on the education stuff like the people on the school committee do, and I am not an architect or anybody else. So a lot of my opinions I felt were just going to be my opinions, and I felt that what needed to go into that matrix needed to be more qualified opinions than mine, if that makes sense. Like, that's why I did not fill it out, and Mike Quinley didn't make me fill it out. I mean, I could have filled it out, but I didn't want to sway it by just giving my opinion. I have an opinion, but it's when a lot of those questions aren't things that I felt like I could give a properly educated opinion on, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I just think, you know, part of this is wanting to hear from the community about their concerns and address their concerns in a way that hopefully allows them to understand the project better and understand the choice better in a way that they can then support it.
Well, I was going to ask, is there a way that we can put out, not necessarily a full survey before, but could we do a gather questions, like even if it's just a drop your question in here kind of thing? Because I think that we can take all of the different letters that have come in and have gone to the selectmen or have gone to members of this committee with their opinions, and kind of put together a frequently asked question things. But still, you know, all of those things are probably coming from maybe, like, say 20 people. but there may be lots of other people that have random questions that haven't taken the time to write a letter. So can we do some blasts out, and maybe it's a simple one question Google form that says, what's your question? And then that way we could try to build some kind of presentation against the most frequently asked questions to try to get those questions answered for people. And then if they have follow-up questions, they can ask them in the Q&A. But if they don't, then maybe their
I
question
also
got
think
answered
that,
because.
I'm sorry. I also think
No,
that
go ahead.
I also think that we should address questions or topics that have come up that we haven't addressed in the past. You make sure that we address them in this public forum, just to, I mean, I know like a couple of things have come up about more in depth on the WeLog site that I think that we should probably make sure that we highlight in the public forum.
Yeah.
You mean like traffic and conservation, or?
Yes, and then, yes.
Okay.
I think those are all great suggestions. This is Emily. Something I would also add that I've seen that have been helpful in previous projects is also asking how you're getting your information. In other words, do you feel like there's enough communication? Do you feel like there needs to be more? That's usually a good indication of what's sticking, or at least thinking about sort of future public outreach. What is effective?
Okay. Yep. So,
Yeah, and I was going to say, Emily, you had done a sort of push through the social media and developed a little bit of a summary, which maybe we could share if they were allowed to do that, or we could sort of circulate it. But I think you were trying to sort of holistically understand kind of what issues were hot button for folks, and then use that as a sort of way to think about, okay, how do we structure a discussion that helps to address those questions?
I can walk through it if that's the right point in time to do that now.
So,
Great.
and it's Tim. I'm just a little late.
Hey,
but
Tim.
I don't. Hi. I at least when we did the grade config, we tried to eventually say, hey, what are the different, ways people can get information, and let's zero in on like 3. Like that we want to help clarify. And like so I don't know, like and I just saw that the blog that went out, I go to that FAQ. Was that FAQ the broad one that we've been using that talks about everything, or was it?
yes. Yeah, that was the one that's been pushed out.
Okay, that covers a few. But Anime, at one point you and I even worked, I said, hey, we could do A, B, C, like we could do 8 things and it might still create not the level of clarity we're seeking, or we could do 3 things and make sure we do them really well. And I, so I just, is that worthwhile to talk about for a minute or two?
Sure, in terms of what would work really well?
Yeah, so there's going to be a forum on the 14th. We know that.
Yes.
It sounds like you were discussing, do we want to do an outreach around questions? Maybe, I don't know. Or is the FA, or is there a couple outreaches we're looking to do before?
So actually, why don't we circle back to this, Tim? So I'd love to hear, Emily's list, and then we can figure out, how to get, how to start addressing those and how best to move forward to get to engage the public. So can we put a pin in that?
Yeah, sure.
Super.
Yeah. I'll just go through this quickly. So I've got a couple categories, so bear with me. So there's a lot of concern about project costs and what the project costs are. I'm finding some different citation numbers. So some will say, given the WeLock new build configuration, that is more expensive than a Dale Street. And some I see the other way around, so that it feels like there's some confusion overall about some of the numbers. And I think also, ways in which you can clarify what we know now. we're not going to know the final project costs because we haven't even gotten through design yet, but ways in which we can sort of do buckets or clarify. And then there's also some concern about whether, what do you, if you do choose Dale at Wheelock, what do you do with the 1941 and 1969 building? And what does that mean as a town asset? So that's part of that. So it's a lot of question about how much that would be. There's also concern about what is the annual tax rate increase that'll be a result of this project, and just clarifying what those numbers would be. Another aspect that I see is project information. So there's a feeling that the community might not have, I'm seeing Mike Quinlan in the waiting room. He's got his hand raised. There might not be, let's say, a plan for communicating future information. So one specific comment that I saw is, what is the process for releasing the PSR? Where will there be a comment? What is the process for the SBC to be able to comment on it? So a little bit about project information and how that can be clarified. Project schedule, I think there was a comparison that I saw of this project with another project that's in the MSBA module system. And I think it's important that when one compares two projects to make sure that it's apples to apples. And knowing a bit about that project, there might be some connections that are either valid or not valid. So I think it's worth just being careful about what we compare ourselves to and what others are comparing ourselves to as well. And so you could also find some comparable projects that you actually feel are similar and what those concerns are. We're in a really crazy unknown time right now. And part of that factors in things as well. Another bucket or category I'm seeing are neighborhood issues. And these are specifically the proximity of Dale to town center versus Wheelock as not town center. And I think understanding a little bit more of what is the interplay between that, advantages and disadvantages. Some of the language I hear are Wheelock is a small residential versus sort of the more, let's say, urban town center, and how those play into the project in terms of, and of course, everyone's favorite topic, traffic, and understanding what some of the traffic implications are. Being able to give citations or understanding what those implications are can either validate or reinforce what I believe are some personal anecdotal comments about traffic. Like, I have my own particular corner that I either like or don't like. And I think getting outside of some of the personal experience to sort of look at it, I think there is an interesting statistic that we need to sort of think about, which is the district takes the bus fleet of 20 to all of the K-5 schools, right? And that fleet basically stops at every school. So looking at it in terms of bus in a normal time, right? So bear with me. The bus traffic versus parent traffic versus staff traffic, and what the advantages and disadvantages of both sites would be. Then there's the site issues and environmental, and I was talking about that a little bit as we were on the beginning of the call, just sort of understanding its relationship to wetlands and water and sewer, and understanding that. There seems to be some, I will say, a little bit of misinformation or confusion regarding some of the geo-environmental reports. So I dug into those today, and so I think we need to clarify what some of the recommendations are from the geo-environmental report, because it feels like there's some picking and choosing of certain information without looking at the whole picture. And then I think there's obviously the community forums. What I found, and I'm going to just sort of stop there for a moment and pivot. What I found missing in the dialogue online were discussions about the educational benefits. And I think that concerned me a bit, mainly because I had mentioned, I spoke to Steve Grenham today. I did a lot of work with the teachers and the district, really getting to understand how education is taught at Dale Street. And I think there's some really unique and amazing things about that school, and how this project can support that learning, based on grade configuration or even location. And there's some opportunities which I can go into greater depth, but I'm going to pause there for a minute. Larry, is there something that you want me to stop or dive deep on until I go to my full list?
No, I think, those were sort of the categories. And I think what was interesting was looking at the dialogue that's happening in social media, because a lot of times that's where people are taking their cues. And sort of, as Emily was starting to do and has done a more thorough job, which we could share with everybody, what is the messages that's being tracked around through social media? And then how are we responding to those messages in ways that is informational and helps people to understand where accuracies are and where inaccuracies might not be. So that was sort of the thought of, let's, for us anyway, hearing where the critics are, hearing what they're saying, and then trying to respond more specifically to those concerns can be helpful.
I think that's a perennial question, whether, and with any committee, in terms of diving into that social media world. And I think that on the whole, for this particular project, Mike Quinlan has been very good about clarifying. But I mean, that is a strategy to talk about in terms of how do we, some of it is just, it's constant. And when people have jobs and other commitments, it's so hard to keep on top of. So I don't know the right answer. So I don't know if anyone here has a suggestion.
Well, I would say, Anime, what's been successful from an informational standpoint on other projects is monitoring what's being said, and then making sure that you typically, if there's a question out there, right? It's either a question or a statement. If there's a question out there, that typically means that there's sort of a desire for more information. And whether it's producing another FAQ or keeping a list of these questions, if one person has it, chances are there's another 10. And not necessarily responding to everything from a one-to-one, but making sure that in public forums, this is what we're hearing, and we want to make sure that that statement is validated and that we can provide or get back to you with information more in a global sense, not necessarily responding to everything one for one, but just saying, this is something that we need to put in our report or we need to put in our presentation because we're hearing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you just brought up a very valid point. We have an FAQ, but that needs to evolve, essentially, is what I'm hearing.
That would be my sense based on the continuing stream. And it was interesting, Mike, I saw you joined, and thanks for sending along a more recent, I think this was a direct email. Yep. And first I've heard somebody now concerned about the eastern end of Elm Street, and the name of the cross street eludes me.
Phillips Street, yeah.
Phillips, thank you. Was sort of the first that we've heard that, and I'm sure it's based on somebody's, how far they are away from the site.
It's not surprising to me. I think that I know those roads pretty well, and I recognize that they're, when you get east of Wheelock, they do become narrow. And there's a particular culvert crossing that is really a one-lane road, and I think that's sort of a concern for those neighbors in that neck of the woods. And I think it's a valid thing to address with them, because we want to minimize, I think, traffic heading in that direction. That, not to say that certainly people that live in that area that bring their kids to the school will need to use it, but in terms of people using that for some sort of cut through and things like that, we'll have to evaluate with the traffic engineer. I don't see that, and maybe I think we need to do some study around it. Maybe there's more to it that I'm aware of, but the bigger cut through that I see is the Knollwood up to Cross Street and then up to Phillip, which goes to Nebo, because people do use that. I've used it in the past to get around really the high school, middle school traffic in the morning, especially. So if you're coming from the south side of town and you want to get around that to be able to get up to 109, that is a cut through that we'll have to evaluate, because I see more traffic going that direction. But it was a fair email that they make sure that when we're looking at this from a traffic perspective, we're looking at all directions from the school, not just the ones heading to the west.
Yeah, so I think that's an example of an evolving concern that people are identifying, and then we need to somehow evolve our analysis and discussion in a way that understands and accepts and addresses that concern.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. Question, folks, and that is, I recall at the select board meeting, I think it was Gus or Mike suggested 2 public forums, one being the regular one we're planning for the 14th,
yep,
and another for the neighborhoods. Are you folks considering that, or?
I think it's essential.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
No, I mean, I think we need to do a targeted meeting with the people who live in that area. Really hear them and what their concerns are, and make sure that we've got at least some study done before that meeting with the traffic engineer, to show them that we are looking at this, and we can have some ideas about mitigation efforts, but then also hear what they have to say and see how that changes our thinking.
Okay, so would this be both for a combo of Elm Street residents and Dale Street residents, or just the Elm?
I thought we were doing those separately.
Yeah, I would tend to want to do them separately, simply because otherwise they could
Right.
They could end up attacking each other.
Okay, all right. So that's really 3 public forums is what I'm hearing then.
Yeah, that's what, I was even playing around with the schedule a little bit, and I was thinking if we had the forum, the next one on the 14th, that the one for the neighborhoods could be done perhaps in the same week, but maybe one. Let me see, where did I have it? I'm sorry, I just had the calendar up. So it would be in October. I was thinking maybe the 27th and then maybe the 29th, just have it in the same week, but maybe the 27th is for the Dale Street neighbors, and maybe the 29th is the Wheelock neighbors.
Dina, can we do the week before? Because we're going to be, well, I guess it doesn't matter because we're not submitting the PSR on October 27th. Never mind.
So I would actually think if anything, we do the week after that, because I think there may be some things that come out of this first public forum that we want to spend some time on before jumping into those meetings.
Okay.
That's just my 2 cents, but if people feel differently.
Not to add too much confusion, but would it be neighborhood meetings first, then the broader public forum, or?
That's not what, so we're sort of working off of, what
The request.
Gus requested. This is sort of his process, what he saw as what the next step should be. And so we're trying to follow that.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Like if I don't live, I live closer to one than the other, but if I just attended the public forum, it would be interesting. Hey, what's the name? You may learn a little more
Yeah.
in the neighborhoods in advance of the broader public forum.
Yeah, the other option, because I would imagine the neighborhood meetings are a little smaller and a little less formal.
Right.
I mean, typically
I
they
agree.
are, and those could almost happen concurrently the same week if that's possible. And you sort of say, okay, because I think part of it is hearing their specific concerns, understanding it, talking it through, hopefully developing a way of getting and elucidating, okay, so what are the concerns of the neighborhood, which may be sort of subsumed over in the overall conversation in the public forum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. That's what I was thinking, that the 14th would sort of touch upon everything. And then you could get a bit more detailed on the 27th and the 29th, talking about the specific neighborhoods.
Sorry, did I hear Mike Quinlan suggesting the week after, as in the first week of November, or sticking to the 27th and the 29th?
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering and out loud, I haven't really thought it through with any depth. So, but my initial reaction is that there may be some things that come out of the 14th that, you know, that will require us as a team to, you know, do some additional study or find some, answer some questions that may take a little bit of time. But I mean, I'd leave that up to, you know, mainly Arrow Street. If you feel that there's enough space between those two at 2 weeks, then that might be a different conversation. But I was just thinking that there may be some other things that we want to have prepped for those meetings, in terms of especially things like traffic. Like we still need to sort out. I think we need to, you know, do some evaluation on the traffic now that school's back in session, and I recognize it's not in its full condition. It's a COVID scenario, but I do think we need to do some additional traffic study in those areas, just to be able to have better data to bring to the community.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Leo was suggesting, because he's doing drop off now, that the numbers of cars have swung dramatically. I think again, the two-edged sword on that one could be, if you start to say, well, we're going to build around the COVID-19 traffic pattern, with 80% of the people dropping, you know, private vehicles, it's going to swing dramatically from the historic norm, which is 80% by bus. So
right. So I think we have to do some study and then, you know, apply some sort of rational logic to it about what things will change back to once we're through, when there's a vaccine or something and we're back to non-COVID conditions.
I guess the one thought would be to do a neighborhood meeting that is more of us listening to the concerns. And then when they express various issues and say, okay, let us get back to you in a couple of weeks with more information. That's sort of, you know, one strategy. The other is to say, okay, the issues of the traffic will be brought up in the community meeting on the 14th, and therefore, to your point, Mike, is a week or two later, we're trying to meet with the neighbors and saying, well, we heard you, and here's how we're trying to understand and you know, think about future mitigation strategies that address your concern.
I guess what I'm thinking is, we know traffic is a concern already, right? That's been clearly vocalized. So I think we as a team need to understand it as best we can at this point. So whether it's doing, you know, a day out there taking traffic counts or something like that, I think having some sort of data as a starting point for the conversation is important, rather than it just devolving into, well, what I think Emily had said about this anecdata about, oh, well, you know, I went through here and I always get blocked up at this intersection and blah, blah, blah. I think we need to have some data to start from that's actual data and not just anecdata.
Makes sense. Like I mean, worst case, you apply a model, but.
Right.
everything's up 80%, but you at least have some sense A versus B.
No, on traffic. So I agree. I think we need to deal with traffic because I think that's probably the biggest issue on Wheelock. And the traffic, the real issue around traffic is the background traffic. It's not, I think traffic engineers with discussions with the schools can project what the impact of the school will be on traffic. The concern is what do we have for a baseline? What is the non-COVID baseline traffic problems, and how will these projected impacts from the school make it, worse in a way that needs to be mitigated? And so I think I agree with Mike. We need to find some, I don't know how much this is getting outside of communications, but I think we do need to have some better idea of traffic so we can answer that question with intelligence and research. And I don't know what we have for background for what the information we have of traffic background in that area, like whether there were other studies done relative, townwide for that.
There haven't been.
Yeah, we did a search, and Tim, to your point, we're sort of going down a little bit, but we did a search. There have been several traffic studies done in the last 5 years or so. Unfortunately, not of the intersections that we're sort of thinking about. And I'm happy to share the information we could find in ours. I think if I understand when the police fire headquarters were built, it sounded like there wasn't really a study done at that point because that was it was on the existing site or something to that effect.
That's correct.
So that would have been one, but otherwise, we found one for an assisted living up on Main Street, a couple others, but anyway, so to your point, the functioning of South Street and Elm, the ability to clear the Elm Street intersection as cars are leaving Wheelock and merging back into South Street is going to be really driven by the background traffic. If South Street is relatively empty, it happens pretty seamlessly, and you put in a stop sign and we're good to go. If South Street is busy at that particular time of the morning or afternoon, then it may go slower, and that can be when traffic begins to build.
Didn't Mike Marcucci say there was a traffic study done to look at, and I know it's further down, but a light at that 27 intersection? Wasn't there?
I thought there had been, Tim. We can't seem, I don't think we've been able to find that. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that intersection has been evaluated for a stoplight because it's kind of a weird intersection, and it definitely backs up at rush hour, especially all the way up the hill. But I know Chief Meany, I had talked to him about this a long time ago, but I don't know that it ever got to the level of any sort of traffic study. I think what they figured out was that there was no easy way to do the light, and there was at the time no money for a study. So I think it kind of was put to bed.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a Warren article that didn't pass about funding the study for that light.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Well, I know that the light may not have passed, but there's no study. I thought we've had some detail around what those intersection backups were at peak time, and you could sort of extrapolate how far back it goes. And
yeah, and I thought so too, Tim, but nobody in town seems to have access to anything. But also that intersection is backing up during rush hour, which is well after pickup time. So, there's a little bit of an offset between traffic that may be influenced by the school versus traffic that's, influenced just in, as you called it, background traffic from the existing condition.
There definitely is something, and because Richard DeSorga stood up at town meeting about that light, and that we might have spent like a small amount of money on an initial survey, but then there was an article at the next town meeting that was over $100,000 that did not pass.
Let's do some more
I was on the
digging.
warrant committee when that happened.
Yeah, I know because I did a bunch of digging a while ago trying to find anything that was related to that, just traffic in general
Did
in
you look in
Medfield,
the
and
warrant committee files?
that I didn't
If you
do.
didn't go there. All right,
Yeah,
let me look.
yeah, no, that would be
Let me
great. And I
look.
think anything that gives us a little better sense, and I think to the point you were making a minute ago, Mike, is traffic in the morning. There's often an overlap between the commuter traffic and the school traffic. In the afternoon, usually it's not as much of an issue because the school is ending up mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And the real build on commuter traffic typically is happening 5, 6
Yeah,
o'clock. And
I know at that intersection in particular. So I just actually, thankfully, Jess Riley is listening in, and she texted me that she knows where the traffic study is, and she's going to get it for us. So,
whoa,
And to be honest, it's not something, I mean, I think we should be talking to the traffic engineer,
agreed.
having them model the conclusions of that study in a way that makes sense for what we're trying to do, which is essentially is to figure out, I don't think it's hard to project the new school traffic. It's really what impact it has on the existing problem there already.
right.
And that's kind of, I think, is going to require the traffic engineer to model that. Not us, basically.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple aspects of that. There's, I know that some in that neighborhood just to the south on South Street, certainly are frustrated by that intersection at South and Main. I'm sorry, South and Spring Street, and then there's the issue of the cut throughs of during rush hours, both in the morning and the afternoon. There are people who want to avoid the clogging in downtown on 109 and will turn off at Nebo Street and cut through Nebo down to Phillip and down to Cross Street and Knollwood to get to the South Street and then to the South Street extension, because people even in Norfolk and Franklin and some other towns, take a lot of back roads through there to avoid traffic from 128, et cetera. So I think those are the two main aspects of the traffic concerns, some of which we might be able to solve, some of it which we may not, because they're existing problems that we can't control. But I believe that the traffic, at the very least, understanding the data about how traffic exists today in terms of number of cars that are passing through those neighborhoods needs to be understood from a baseline perspective, because otherwise it's easy to say that any traffic is because of the school, which isn't quite isn't accurate either. It's really a question of understanding the baseline so we can understand what the increase would be relative to that.
Right.
So going back then, Mike, to your earlier thought, I would say yes, if we're wanting to present new traffic analysis, which includes traffic counts in the sort of COVID-19 vintage and so forth, pushing those two neighborhood meetings a little back further in the month is probably appropriate. Gives us a little time to.
I know we haven't had a chance to talk about it, Larry, but
Yep.
this has been evolving rather quickly. But that is what I was thinking, just in terms of taking the time to get some data before meeting with that community and really saying, look, here's what we understand is the baseline. Here's what we're projecting is the increase. And then, what are you concerned about, and how can we help mitigate any impact on the neighborhood?
Yeah, what is interesting is when I heard the issue about Phillip Street, when I looked at the town border is actually quite close on the east side of the Wheelock site there.
Yes.
So really there's not many parents who are going to be coming from that direction, maybe some faculty because
right,
they happen to live in that direction. But it's, coming across that little bridge on the Mine Brook.
Yeah, it's not heavily populated in that zone.
Yeah. So, so I think in terms of trying to schedule that, and we can sort of go through in a little more detail with you guys. I'm assuming we should try and do a similar review of also the Dale Street site, because to the extent that that's also a congested area, and certainly Leo was making that point last week, we need to get both sides sort of equally presented so we can do that. And I think based on that, we should then target sometime, as you were mentioning, towards the end of October for those two discussions.
Yeah, I was almost thinking, I mean, it depends on how quickly we can pull that info together, but I was thinking that would more be along the lines of the beginning of November.
Okay.
I want to give you guys the time to be able to pull it all together, and I don't want it to be rushed.
Is there a new timeline now? So I understand that MSBA is not penalizing us, thankfully. So we're skipping a cycle. So what's that new deadline?
So I don't know that we've formally heard back from the MSBA. There was some informal discussion.
Okay.
Unless, Lynn, have you heard anything new?
No, we haven't heard anything formally yet.
So.
All right. My misunderstanding. Sorry.
Their initial reaction was supportive, so I'm hopeful that will continue.
But nothing formal. Okay.
No, but that said, we are pulling together the dates for the since we're not making the October submission, we're now looking at an end of December submission for the February board meeting. So basically along those lines, if you basically take where we were last week with trying to get a Board of Selectmen vote to support the recommended option, we basically need to, by the middle of November, have that same vote in order for the design team to wrap up the submission for the end of December, because they're going to need some time to pull it all together. So we don't have formal dates on it all yet, but that's the approximate time frame.
Yeah, just quickly, I did, like you said, we don't have an official go ahead to do it, but what I had working our way backwards was the submission of the PSR to the MSBA on December 29th. And, that would mean we'd want to vote on the PSR submission to the MSBA by the school building committee on the 16th of December. And then going back even further, we'd want to issue a draft of the PSR to the SBC on the 9th, so early December, in order for them to vote mid-December.
But I would think that we would want to vote on the preferred solution like early November, end of October even, just to get, because of the holidays and everything else, just to give Air Street enough time to develop the preferred schematic.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here. That's not really the purpose of this meeting. So I think, Anna Mae, we're going to be working with the OPM team and the design team to pull together that schedule.
Great.
I think we have time right now. We have the public forum planned for the 14th as a first step, and over the next week or so, we'll pull together and solidify some more of the details around the next meetings before any sort of subsequent vote by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. So really, you folks are going to deal with the content. But I do like Emily's approach, her list. That's great. So really, the context of this group is, communicating all this out. But we got some suggestions that I just want to recap here. And get consensus. Sharon Tatro suggested either, either a pre-question or, people submitting questions perhaps to Lynn's email address that she created, or a Google form, or a pre-survey, how to Emily's suggestion as well, how best do you receive information? So what do we think about that, getting something like that out before the 14th, or do we wait till after the 14th to get, or are we going to do a survey at all?
I think at a minimum, you just ask for questions to be submitted in advance. That way you can, if any questions require research, you can try to get those answers rather than having to say, what's your email address? I'll get back to you, because then everybody benefits from the answer rather than just following up with one person individually.
Okay, so a Google form to collect questions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Either a Google form or something that somebody can easily click on. So like if we want to use Lynn's email address, like the nice thing is like click on that and then it opens up your Outlook or something, like something that's simple, then rather than just go and email, like if it, as long as it could have some kind of hyperlink in it that it works.
Okay.
That's all I'm suggesting, because then it makes it simple. Because like if I'm on my phone randomly and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm reading the thing, I do have a question. If I click on it to do it and it doesn't work, and then I get frustrated, I'm like, oh, I need to get back to it. Maybe I won't, maybe I will. Okay. So that's why I was saying like something just simple that, submit your question. And if that's really it. Just, like incredibly simple. Either a hyperlink that opens up your email and it works, or just a really simple Google form that's just collecting questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think something simple and just saying, look, we're trying to collect as much of people's concerns as possible.
Right.
I can imagine it being Tuesday. Yeah, today's Tuesday still. Is trying to sort of get something out by the end of this week, which would give people next week to respond, and hopefully we would then be in the process of addressing those questions for the following week.
Right, like you could say something like, we will endeavor that if this thing is not on the 14th, we will endeavor that every question that's been asked by the 10th, we will try to provide an answer. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know, you don't even have to commit to that, but the whole point is that if they submit the questions, you can maybe cut down on the hours of Q&A, because people will hopefully have gotten their questions actually answered. Rather than guessing what their questions were, let's let them ask them. Like we have a bunch because people have submitted letters and things like that, but let's try to get the people that haven't taken the time to write a letter.
Okay.
I think that's a great suggestion, Sharon. And I also have recently been looking at the May survey that you guys did. And there's some fantastic points in the comments of those as well. So it's worth going through those, if they haven't quite made it on the FAQ list. Just some concerns or questions.
Great. And then that leads into that evolve. So we have an FAQ, but I like the idea of not changing it up, but evolving it into the more current questions that have come up as well. So is that something that can be worked on beforehand, realistically?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And so question for you folks, and that is, there are over 4,900 households that get the free local newspaper, the Hometown Weekly, and it was just an idea that was thrown around. What do you folks think about either advertising, mentioning the question or something or other of an insert in the paper? I think it costs $241. We would have to create and print it on ourselves and get it to Hometown Weekly, but then it would hit 4,929 houses. I mean, is that something that is overkill? Is it
I'd do it. I think you should do it.
What do other folks think? Thank you, Sharon, though.
Well, because I mean, there are a lot of people on Facebook, but there are a lot of people who are not, and so if you want to be able to say that we advertise these and people did that, then That's your main big hit, because there's a lot of people in town that will just pick that up and look at that.
As a
I have a
confirmed-
client that refuses to take any news from anything other than a printed source. So
as that client, I think it's a good idea too.
Okay, good.
I think it's short money for being able to do that. I mean, you don't want to do that every single time, but maybe, I mean, there's been a lot of, we're doing this extra public forum for a reason. Spend the $240 bucks.
Okay, all right.
So is there a printing deadline that we have to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I sent him an email this evening to find out, because really we want this to drop next Thursday, because if our meeting's on the 14th, and so and it drops on the Thursday, so we would have to get that. Normally I think it might be Monday, but I will confirm that. But I suppose my question is, if we did that, what do we want on that beyond announcing, the October 14th? I mean, I think it would be great use of space to highlight some key issues. And now, is that something Left Field could create for the insert?
Just as a quick
Yes.
point, Emily's reminding me that we got to be careful about where the money is coming from for sort of support of a project.
Okay.
But this isn't support of a project, right? We're just going to advertise the community.
Yeah,
It's
it's not advocating, Larry. It's just informing people of when the public forum is and that they should show up and that type of thing.
okay.
Maybe
Okay.
key issues that are going to be discussed, so we're not swaying it either way.
Yeah, I also, and I mean, that would be similar to like a save the date, same design, but yeah, what are the key topics we're going to cover?
No, I agree with Tim. I think Tim Knight, I think we should, keep this to the scheduling of the forum and not get into sort of key issues and stuff like that, because that starts to get into gray area. And we don't need to go there in terms of any sort of violations. I think just sending out a notice with, maybe a rendering or something and stating that we're going to be talking about it on the 14th, and here's how you can access that meeting.
I think that was my point to Larry. It's just we need to be careful about staying above the board and making
Absolutely.
sure. And I know that the IG's office is always willing to review things before you put them out. So that's a great resource in case you're not quite sure.
Yeah, I agree.
They're willing to help us out.
I would recommend that.
Okay.
Have them look at it.
Would you, I may know the answer, but would you put the neighborhood dates on that as well? Or is that just going to confuse people?
No, because those aren't set. And yeah, I agree. That could be confusing. I think let's focus on the task at hand.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to focus on October 14th, 6 p.m. Okay, great. Now, is that, I like the graphic that Tracy put together with the save the date. Could we use something like that as it's created, and maybe just?
Sure.
Okay, all right, cool. All right, great. So we agreed on the Google form of some sort, but an easy click essentially to get some questions pre-forum and an evolving FAQ. And we'll go for the insert. And I got a suggestion by Jess Riley about perhaps, do we use, I don't know if Zealous is having any other Saturday, how they have those pop-ups. And I don't know if, we have a meet and greet, something where we invite community out to the site, or somewhere where they can ask questions, social distance, wear masks, reactions.
Certainly, as I did with the public safety building, I think we're definitely, as we get closer to the vote, would be open to all sorts of, coffee talks, and we did a road show.
Yeah.
I don't know you know, right now, I think we have to focus on these public forums because of COVID and
Yep.
you know, getting in-person type meetings, I think is a little dicey at this point, maybe with small groups. Like, I would consider that for like a meeting with the neighborhood is, you know, meeting them on the Wheelock site. And
Yep.
I just did that with some residents in the town of Ashland on Friday for their project. So
That
I
would be
think with a
awesome.
small enough group, maybe a representative group from that neighborhood, I think that would be appropriate. But I think the big public forums right now are the main focus.
Okay, no, great. But I like that idea of inviting maybe the neighborhood groups into that space. That's a great idea. Okay, very good.
Sorry, if I could just sort of open a question for a minute. The existing Dale Street School, is it worth trying to have folks see the issues of that building? Because that's a building that's specific as opposed to the site, which is a little more, you know, easy for people to get their heads around.
You know,
Is
I
that-
mean, we've done that sort of many times. I know,
Yep.
you know, Steve Grenham gave tours of that building a while
Yeah.
ago when we were starting this process. Is another one of those worthwhile? I don't know. I think people recognize that that building's in poor shape, and doing another tour of it, I don't think really changes much personally. But, you know, if people feel otherwise, then I can be convinced.
So maybe see where folks think on the 14th.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was there's some amount of group who seem to be thinking that we can magically renovate the existing building. And sometimes, you know, when you go through and say, well, here's the issues that are being dealt with when you talk about a renovation, people's eyes open up a little better and say, oh, really? Huh, I hadn't thought about that. But maybe see where people are after the 14th, and then that could be done if that seems to be a helpful step.
Agreed.
Point. Alrighty. So it looks like we've got a plan of attack, and also Jeff Marsden confirmed that the PR firm is going to write an article about this to the press and the Patch, which will be helpful as well. And alrighty, so we've got a couple of questions here. Chris McHugh Potts, I would sincerely appreciate answers and feedback to these. 1, we need more detailed but user-friendly financials with all-in numbers. There are some great samples out there. Okay, number 2, people need to see Dale add reno option in more detail, not just Wheelock. Number 3, will school committee have a chance to discuss site options from an educational standpoint prior to selectmen vote and take questions specifically on that? Leo stated that school committee had discussed the sites, yet it never did. This is a big reason why the community isn't talking about educational aspects of the project. Okay, please consider having Saturday, Sunday where people can visit Wheelock with the site staked out based on footprint of G1 option. And 5 for Lynn, what is the general time frame for when MSBA was asked for that second extension? And as a longtime PR community affairs professional, I can tell you there's an absolute apples to apples comparison with process and how decisions are made with other school projects. It's about best practices. So a lot of things in here. I do want to ask a question relating to that school committee bit. Now, Mike, do you think that this next public forum could be, you know, a multi-leveled committee meeting in terms of Board of Selectmen so they can speak, so they're not violating any open meeting law?
It will be.
Oh, okay.
It will be. No, I
committee-
insisted on it because, you know, the Board of Selectmen are the ones driving this.
Good.
So
Okay.
they have to be able to speak freely and respond to what they discussed both last week and what their further thoughts are. So it will be posted as a Board of Selectmen's meeting as well.
Okay, will it be also school committee or just?
I can't speak for the school committee.
Okay, well, I didn't know if they were
I
invited.
mean, you're certainly welcome to, if you feel like there's going to be a quorum of the school committee and you'd like to be able to speak freely. By all means, I'm not opposed to that if you want to post that meeting for the school committee as well. But I think you should take that up with your committee.
Yes, and Jeff. Okay, all righty. Great. And then, Lynn, that question for you, what was the general time frame for when MSBA was asked for the second extension? Do you have an answer for that?
We asked for the second extension in June.
Okay, great.
But the extension that we're requesting now, we asked it after the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Yeah, just to be clear, this is the third extension.
Correct. Okay, great. And then Nate Bazinet, I hope I pronounced it correctly, he attached the Rose Bay traffic study document in this Q&A, just FYI to folks.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I think we have that one, correct? That was the one for the senior housing one up on Pound Street. I don't know, Larry, if it's the one you have.
You do have.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have that, but
I found in my warrant committee emails the one from 2016 for the light, and so I just emailed it to Mike, so he's got it now.
Yep, I've already forwarded it to the team.
All right.
perfect. Okay.
Very good.
I think what we should do. Sorry, Anna Mae, you were.
No, go for it. I was just going to kind of recap who's going to do what to make sure everything is covered. So.
Well, I think just thinking holistically about our presentation, the presentation we gave last week to the Board of Selectmen was a little condensed because we were seeing that as the opportunity to ratify a decision that was, sort of made in more detail by the school building committee. I think in what we can put together a draft is likely we're kind of going through in a little more specificity each of the 11 schemes that we have so folks can understand it, and then talking more specifically about some of these issues like traffic and so forth. And then I think in some ways having a little bit of a sort of Q&A dialogue kind of presentation. You've asked this, here's the answer. You've asked that, here's the answer. And I just wanted to get people's take on that. Depending on how deep we go into this, it could be a fairly long presentation.
So that's not the goal, and we can talk about this more with the working group just to kind of pull the presentation together. But the goal is to keep the presentation short, in my opinion, and really to open it up for people who want to ask questions and give feedback. I think we need to keep the presentation brief, but provide some basis for discussion for people who may be, just now paying attention for the first time. So I think there's more to come. Obviously, we've got tons of data and imagery, and but the tenor of this should not be, as Gus put it, should not be us sort of speaking to them or telling them, as he put it. It's more about gathering their honest feedback and input. So that's his stated goal of this, and I want to stick to that.
Okay, all right, that's helpful.
Very good. Tim Knight, I want to circle back to what you were talking about before we went into Emily's list. Do you want to bring that up again, please?
Sure. I think we've almost covered it. I mean, I always like to, all right, what's the package?
Yeah.
So, and I have my notes. You have an FAQ for the overall project. You drill in a little bit. So
yeah.
Sort of a save the date, making sure people are aware and can attend.
Yeah.
If you have the save the date, I think that's where Sharon's request for, pre-questions are always helpful.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, having a link there
would
be great. It doesn't sound like there's post-forum surveys or anything. And so I think I'm okay. I mean, it was
Okay,
good
good. No,
to go through that.
super. All righty. Now, and am I safe to assume that Left Field or Arrow Street will deal with Emily's list for the FAQs, the evolving FAQ?
Well, certainly we can circulate it, and I guess between the two of us, figure out where we need input or where we can make some questions. I think how we want to give that to people is still the sort of question on my mind. Is it something that we're posting on a website? Is it something where, and I appreciate Mike saying, let's try and keep the presentation to the minimal so we can then have a good, robust conversation. And I think that's appropriate. So we're not going to go through.
In the past, we sent it out in an email blast. We put it on Facebook and we posted it on the project website. I don't know if you have an idea for something different than that. We can look at it, and we can certainly add questions to that list. I would be, we should make the questions. Well, I think we should really look at the questions to make sure they are new content, and make the questions generic so that we can answer them with facts.
Okay, so why don't we then? So if everybody's in agreement that it's sort of a something that kind of gets published, as it were, we can then share with you, Lynn, and sort of start to boil down some of the stuff that Emily has pulled from the various social media into a kind of a FAQ.
An updated one, yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the best course of practice. In other words, I've got a list of topics, so let's formulate them into questions, and questions that are generic enough that they get to the original point, but also we can answer them in a truthful, transparent way.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Great.
Now,
Yeah. We
is
can
it
build
worth-
on what we have.
Sorry?
Yeah, and we can build on the FAQ that we do have. So we'll
Yeah,
work with
exactly.
Arrow Street to do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So shall we aim to touch base next week? I mean, there are some things that will get out this week, and but shall we touch base next week to see where we are?
Sure.
I'll send a doodle to see when we can meet.
Yeah, I think can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's Tracy. I think that we should try to meet a little bit more consistently as we go through to November. So just more on the communications end, and see where, just to kind of review how it just even to sometimes have a debriefing on what we did and what we could have done better, that, just on the mechanics of it. Because I think that is sometimes where we're falling a little bit short, is more not on the content. The information's good, but we're just 2 beats behind everybody else getting their information out. And we're, as opposed to creating the story that we want to tell about both sites, about the project in the big picture piece. So that's one thing I did want to say. But the other thing I did want to mention, and maybe you guys did, because I know I've been in and out of the call, is I think we need to get younger parents in this conversation. Because when I'm listening to these things, or I see people who are writing comments on, I'm not seeing the younger parents whose kids are going to benefit from this school. And maybe you know them better, Anna Mae, because you know more people from the school committee, but I'm just not seeing that level of engagement that I feel could be beneficial and add a lot of excitement. This is, I mean, I joined this group when you asked me, Anna Mae, because I was excited for the town to get something really valuable that it needed for young children in their education. And I just don't feel like they're there. I don't know, do other people feel that way?
I completely agree with you. If you can come up with a way to get them engaged, I'm all for it. They have been a difficult group to get to really participate. So I'm all for getting.
Well, I think we need to.
Go ahead.
maybe we need to extend some invitations personally, and I'm a peon. No one's gonna care if I call them, but Mike and Anna Mae and Tim, you guys seem important. Maybe I can get a list of people, and phone calls can be made. I don't know, like the people who are at least the PTO presidents of the lower elementary schools. I think we should be emailing them, asking them to come on the 14th. And maybe even introducing them or something. And letting them know that their input is needed and valued. Anna Mae, what about the people from the that visioning group that you've mentioned a few times?
No, I will have some names there, so I'll make some personal phone calls. I think that's a great idea, Tracy.
Yes, I think between now and our next meeting, we need to I do know the person from new in town who is the president, only because her name happens to be Tracy, and her last name starts with an R, so we have occasionally crossed paths. And I will to do that, but I feel without them, it's just whatever. So we're all on the same page with that. And then the other thing that if we could talk about next time, Anna Mae, is I saved all my comments for last. Sorry, so thank you for your patience. When I would like to know on October 14th what we want to send out post the forum. It doesn't have to have the content, but I don't want to, I feel like we're, again, missing that beat, that we should be ready to go with what we feel is a way to reinforce the message that came out that night.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we can just maybe have that as an agenda item. Like one thing I would really like to see is a letter to the editor, Mike, maybe from you. If the Wheelock site is the site that, has that value, I think a personal note from the chair of the building committee saying why you selected it, how you researched it, why you feel it's the best option, even given nothing's perfect, but I think a really nice piece could come out that way after the 14th. That was more personal, because I feel like we need a little bit more of a personal touch, I guess is my point. So anyway, that's all I have to say. And I'm glad to do whatever pieces I need to do. But those are, Q&As and FAQs are great, but we need to make this a living personal, and we just need the personal touch.
Yeah. Thank you. Mike, is that even possible to write that? Because are you then taking sides? You know what I mean? Isn't this like that?
We're here to take sides. But there's a difference between making a recommendation and, so I'm not an expert in that. I'd have to get that reviewed, but if it's, as long as it fits within Massachusetts open meeting law and all the law, then I'm fine doing that. I just need to get that cleared because that is a delicate line between advocating and informing.
Yeah, I think Emily's suggestion of passing things through the AG's office is brilliant.
Yep.
We'll cover.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, no kidding.
And as we get more towards town vote and all that stuff, I've actually attended other school building committees, and Mike, you might have done this as well, where the AG's office will actually come in and talk to the SBC.
Yep.
And give them kind of a training too. So that helps as well.
Yep, we actually just had them do that in Ashland. We had them do a training for the SBC. So I think that's a great idea, Emily.
Awesome.
Yep. And Anna Mae, what about that other idea that in passing I mentioned, and I do think you said you thought it was good, so I'm going to mention it again, about doing something on Medfield TV.
Oh yes, that is a brilliant idea, I think. I suppose we'd have to figure that out. I think I've broached it to you, Mike, in terms of Medfield TV is always looking for pieces to cover. And yeah. I mean, it could be like an updates thing, you know, yep. kind of a thing. I think Brett is very keen on doing that. And
I'm happy to do that. And, you know, if we need support from Arrow Street and Left Field, I'm sure they would as well. I did an interview in Seekonk on their public public television for their project before they voted on their project. So I'm absolutely willing to do that.
Cool. So I'll reach out to Brett and maybe we can schedule something.
Yeah, I mean, it will probably be doing a couple, certainly between now and the vote,
Yeah.
which will be next fall now.
Yeah, but it could be like part 1, part 2, whatever.
Sure.
So
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant idea, Tracy. I like that. All right. Anything else we want to before, and I have to approve these minutes, or as long as you guys approve them. So anything else we need to mention? I'll send out a doodle for next week. I think we should meet more consistently. Anything else before we get into the minutes? Okay. So on the agenda, I have May 14th, June 2nd, June 17th, July 15th, July 29th, and August the 5th. So actually, May 14th and June 2nd were already approved on our July 15th meeting. And the June 17th meeting was actually a regular Dale Street School Building Committee meeting and not a subcommittee meeting. So we really just have to approve the July 15th, July 29th, and August 5th. And I'm wondering if we have a motion to approve those 3 meeting dates.
So moved. It's Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, and thank you for helping me write them. And do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Sharon Tatro, thank you. And we'll take a roll call vote. Tim Knight.
Approved.
Tim Bonfatti.
Approved?
Sharon Tatro.
Approved.
Tracy Rogers.
Yeah.
And Anna Mayo Shea Brook, yes. All right, wonderful. They passed, thank you, or they are approved. Great. All righty, so we will meet next week based on our doodle that I'll send out tonight. All righty, so this meeting is now, do we have a motion to adjourn? Now we have to.
So moved.
Okay, Tim Knight, and seconded by? Do we have a second to adjourn?
Oh, yes, second.
Sharon. Thank you, sorry, formalities. Tim Knight.
Aye.
Tim Bonfatti.
Yes.
Sharon Tatro.
Yes.
Tracy Rogers.
Yes.
Anna Mayo Shea Brook. Yes, and thank you everyone who tuned in. This was fruitful. Thank you very much, and thanks to the attendees.
Thank you, Anna Mae.
Thanks, Anna Mae.
Thanks, Anna
All
Mae.
righty, ciao guys. Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Bye.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.